All right, so we're beginning Taylor Boggs. Hello. So y'all, I've known Taylor for like 10 years, I think.
About that.
A
Yeah.
long time. So she and I used to work together at American Eagle, like, what up? Um, I didn't talk to her for a number of years because she was out doing all of the dope things that she's going to talk about. And we reconnected recently because we are in similar fields now. Um, so you guys get to learn from her. She's super dope. If you're watching on video, like sup. If you're listening to the podcast, sup. Um, so Taylor, if you would just tell us like, who are you? What are you doing right now? And then we can get into other questions.
Yeah. So my name's Taylor. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am originally from Tampa, Florida, and where I met Amanda. And what else? I did the Peace Corps from 2015 to 2017. But before that, I graduated from USF with my BS in public health and currently finishing up my second master's from the University of Pennsylvania. And yeah, that's a little bit about me. I can tell like hobbies and whatnot as well.
Whatever you want. First of all, I think the fact that you're like, I'm finishing at my second master's, overachiever. I love it. I would actually love if you talked about your time in the Peace Corps, like why you went in, what it was like.
Yeah. So I always kind of knew for many years that the Peace Corps interests me a lot. I think the first time I ever heard about it was in high school, like my senior year of high school, actually. Somebody had returned Peace Corps volunteer had come to one of my classes and spoke about it and things like that. And then it kept like coming up in my undergrad as well. Being a public health volunteer, I think it's just like a very natural segue into that. So it was something that was kind of always in the back of my mind. And after I graduated, I kind of was burnt out a little bit, and I was just ready to like make some money. And I started working at a restaurant, which was a lot of fun because it was like a British pub, so the men and women wore kilts, and that was like really crazy time in my life. And I got to a point where I was really over kind of that scene and like partying a lot. And I met my best friend, my now best friend, through the pub. And one day she was like, "Oh, I just want to, I think I'm gonna sign up for Peace Corps." And I was like, "No freaking way, dude! I've always wanted to do the Peace Corps. Let's do it." And like, she was like my person where like we both signed up for the Peace Corps. We ended up going to totally different countries, and our time overlapped, but weren't the exact same. But it was like that was a really motivating, beautiful factor.
Where did she go?
The Philippines. So I went to Nicaragua. Yeah.
So what do you do? What do you do in the Peace Corps? Because I think some people know, they're like, oh, Peace Corps, you go volunteer for a couple years, but like, what do you do for 2 years?
Yeah, there's so much you can do. There are 6 different sectors in the Peace Corps. So I was in the health sector, but like my best friend was in teaching English. And there are opportunities to even be like TEFL certified, teaching English as a second language or a foreign language. And there's like a technology sector and youth development and business and agriculture. And am I missing any of them?
If you are, someone will tell us in the comments.
Environment.
Let us know if we missed one.
Yeah, environment. So environment was one. So like agriculture and environment are slightly different. Some of the sectors overlap. Like even though I was health, like I would even say I did some like youth and development and stuff like that. And I did, yeah. So every sector has their kind of like goals that they need you to meet. Specifically, what I did, being a and our other titles for it is like community health promoter, health educator, things like that, community educator, health educator, just different variations of that. But we focused a lot on HIV prevention, teen pregnancy prevention, and maternal and child health and improving those outcomes. Nicaragua has the second highest teen pregnancy rate, and it's the second poorest country in Central America. So those are some interesting facts. But I think the most important part is like always remember not having this like white savior complex when entering the Peace Corps, which many people have. And even whenever I was entering, I always was like, I didn't have necessarily that mindset. I still needed to like learn and grow in a lot of ways, but my mindset wasn't like, oh, I'm this all-knowing being because I come from the United States and I'm here to like teach you better things, like I love, and this is how any type of work should be, is like entering a community like respectfully, genuinely wanting to learn about these people and working with them, learning from them. And yeah, like they know their community better than I would ever. And so really before I did any work was really like interviewing community leaders, surveying.
Because they know way better than you do what they need because they live there. They have lived their whole lives. And so you don't know. And that's something that I tell my clients when I start working with them, like, I'm not the expert. I can teach you skills. I can give you resources, but you are the expert in your life. What do I know? I've lived 0% of your life. You're from a totally different type of culture. Like, not for nothing, we don't know shit about anyone that we're working with. So I love that you brought that up because I think a lot of people get into helping professions or get into volunteering or doing good work. Whatever reason people do good work, listen, more power to you. But there is a way that is helpful and there is a way that is damaging. So I think you acknowledging like you have to check your ego at the door, and it's not about you. It's about the communities or the people that you're serving. And so you need to drop your ego in order to be truly effective, because you don't want them dependent on you because you're there for 2 years and then you bounce.
Right. So, right. Hell yeah. And really, and it's still challenging, like even with that mindset. So that was still, it was really hard to get things off the ground because a lot of the time former people and like a lot of organizations come into these countries and really poor countries and they just like dump money or dump projects or things onto these individuals and in these communities. And so that's kind of like what people now expect.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So it's like, I'm like, no, I'm here to like work with you, not do things for you, and like not just like hand you money or these things. Like I really want this to be like a collaboration and sustainable, and like how do we do that? And I have so many more, like now that I'm out of Peace Corps and I'm through most of my masters, I'm so much more better equipped to like have those sustainable pieces. I had
one. How has it helped you? Yeah, go ahead. How has it helped you in your master's? Because if people don't have the training that you've had to to literally take your ego out and to humble yourself. Like, is that something you run into in your programs where there's like a savior complex, or how has it like helped you?
Yeah. So I entered into like the social work program first at UPenn. And so that was really where it was almost like a retrograde, not retrograde, but maybe. Like, is that the word? But like retroactively looking
yes.
at my experience in Peace Corps based on my newfound knowledge in social work. So like social work has so many like social justice themes, and we talked about white savior complex and how it's based in colonialism and, you know, yeah. So really learning about that and recognizing that like Peace Corps does, as wonderful as it can be of an organization, there are things that are still like, ooh, you can do better. You know? Yeah. So I was able to learn from that. I think a lot of the time social work does a pretty okay job. It's not great, or at least my program, but public health.
But they're trying.
Right. And public health too, I think has changed a lot in terms of like being better, but they still have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel you. And I think that's a generational thing. I think it's a culture shift thing. Like, we're really seeing in the last few years, especially with the social justice movement and Black Lives Matter, which is insane to me that people even need to say. Of course they matter. That's a different topic. With more people really like standing up and saying like, absolutely not, your policies and your practices are actively harming the people you're trying to serve. Mm-hmm. Those things are changing. So there's even a dynamic like in counseling where part of our ethics is taught to us that the counseling dynamic, I'm above a client, which is ridiculous and totally backwards. Again, like, people are experts in their own experiences. I don't know what they need. They know what they need. So I think public health and communities is the same way. Like, if you don't live in that community, this sounds mean, but like, how dare you come in and say like, oh, I know what you need? And it's like, what?
Yeah.
You might as well have men legislating women's reproductive health. Like, get out of here. That makes no sense.
Right. And so another big issue I have, and this goes into the white savior complex and like all these things, is I honestly did feel like specifically the teen pregnancy goal was really hard for me to like go in and they wanted to be educated on that, like the health centers and stuff like that. But a lot of the times, like, their really pressing issues were GI tract issues. So there's lots of parasites. People have stomach aches, diarrhea, like dehydration in children.
And so they're focusing on pregnancy.
Yeah, and not to get it wrong, like they do have the second highest after Haiti, right. The highest teen pregnancy rate, and that is alarming. But I also think about like, right, like we don't have as big of an issue of teen pregnancy because we're a wealthier country. We have all of these opportunities. Like, what do you think that these young girls are like? All they know is to be pregnant, have a family, serve their family. Like, not everyone goes to like higher education there. It's there, obviously, but that's like not the norm in these extremely rural, impoverished communities.
And it's a culture thing. Like, people focus on teen pregnancies, but not the men impregnating teenagers.
Yeah.
Guess who's not going to a health clinic? The dudes.
Yeah.
So I think you're right to to point that out. Like, yeah, their goals, it's a nice goal, it's a great goal, but it's a goal from a different culture. Versus if their goal was to educate about water resources, and it's kind of like I'm sure you've heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like at the bottom of the pyramid is food, shelter, safety. That's it. It's pretty hard to get to teen pregnancy if they're sick all the time. That makes no sense. It's like saying, oh, like the epitome of first world problems, right? Like, oh, my Lexus has a flat tire, and someone's like, I'm homeless. So you focus on flat tires instead of homelessness, and it's like, what? You mean no sense?
Yeah.
So yeah.
So that was something that I struggled with a lot in Peace Corps, because I'm like, yo, they're asking me to help with their vector diseases like Zika, dengue, chikungunya, like all these different things. Like, how can I, if I entered as and that's still their health, you know,
right.
Like, why am I constricted to these three? And I was very constricted, and I was looked down on whenever I was doing things that they were asking me to do that they really, really needed. Like, why couldn't I have worked with somebody in the community uplifting women? And this is still like goes into business. So then I would be like seeping into like the entrepreneurship education sector. But if I'm focusing on like them making hand soap, I'm literally helping them boost and empower a woman, because most likely it would be a woman, and I'm helping them improve their health in their community, while still like I was just like, I'm really feeling confined and trapped within it. And that really took a toll in a lot of ways on myself.
I think that makes a lot of sense for anyone who's like listening to this that's in the helping profession, like the bureaucracy, or if you're not in the helping profession and you just work in a corporation, like corporations, if they're too big and they're not extremely careful, can kind of really murder creativity and innovation. So like I ran into the same thing when I was working. And I've been very lucky, like caveat, I've been very lucky to have wonderful, wonderful supervisors and bosses and companies to work for. I worked for 2 before I was like, fuck this, I'm doing my own thing. But I was constricted. So I couldn't run the groups that I wanted. I couldn't, like the first job I had was a very extremely specific model where we weren't dealing with things that needed to be addressed in a certain way because we had to stay within the model. And then you run into a lot of, you have to stay in your lane because XYZ and this is how we run, when it's really like all of these things are a web and not a line on a track, if that makes sense. Like if you stay in your lane, it's because it's so interconnected. It's like mental health. If you focus on the brain but you never talk about the nervous system, what are you doing? Like you're connected. You're not separate. So I feel you. But now you are wanting to. So y'all, not only did Taylor like do the Peace Corps and totally like kill it there, you've had so much personal growth from when I knew you. So like we were babies when we met, like 20. I think I was 20 when I moved to Tampa. You were, I think you're like a year, I don't know how old you are.
I'm 29.
Okay, so you're a year younger than me. So I was never in the party scene because I've always been a baby grandma. But you were. So I would love if you talked about the toll that took and the personal growth that you've had to really focus like, oh, hey, this was not helpful. I need to change some of my behaviors.
Yeah. So I definitely, and you're always going to be like, there's always some, if you start young, right, like drinking or partying, then you're going to have higher risk of, drinking problems, alcoholism, having some issues with that. There's always that possibility. Not saying that that's 100% true all of the time, but it is like the younger.
You are more susceptible.
Yes. Sure. So started pretty young. I had a really good time all throughout my, younger years. When I was even like when I first met you, things like that, I would still like go to the clubs in Ybor and things like that.
Which
maybe once or twice. I know. And that was my scene. Like, was there all of the time throughout college too. Like, just partied a lot. Um, and even outside of college, like when I was working at the restaurant.
Yeah.
And it was just like not great because during that same time, I think a lot of people like drink and party and it's fine and whatever, but like most of the time people experience like traumas, either whether that is like in their childhood or in their teen adolescent years or in their young adult like. And so for me, a lot of my like major traumas happened around the time that I actually knew you. And so what is so funny is like we don't ever really know. I when I talk to people about it, like they're always like, wow, I had no idea. Like, because you're just like, all right, I'm going to party and have fun and put on a face in front of all these other people. But, I experienced like lots of loss. Um, I experienced loss of like a really good, a best friend and then my role model. And I was going through I had lots of issues with unhealthy relationships, but I had one in particularly abusive relationship. And that abusive relationship, once I got out of it, my role model was she was a few years older than me, and like I was just so drawn to her, and I had taken care of her her son who was Adric. He was autistic. So it was really sad. So her life was taken by her ex-boyfriend. So it was just like to like come out of an abusive relationship. I survived and she didn't, was like a really tough. I felt like guilt, even though like why, like I had no, but like you just do. And then like a few years later, my grandmother passing, like literally a year later, my grandmother passing, a year later after that, another best friend of mine passing. I was just like, everything kept hitting me. And so my drinking like went really off the rails after that because I was just like coping and numbing. So yeah. Tried to heal that with going to the Peace Corps. I was like, oh, I'll like go to the Peace Corps and that just proved to be one of the hardest experiences ever because then I'm isolating myself.
Right.
But I persevered through everything. And it wasn't until and then, people don't just numb with alcohol, right? One of my biggest numbing coping mechanisms was binge watching the crap out of TV. And I mean, I would binge watch things till 5, 6 in the morning, sleep all day. Like, it was really, really rough. And like realizing that and knowing like I can still fall into that, but how do I actively not fall into that now? And going through the social work program was something that really, really helped me. I mean, it helped me realize my issue with drinking. It helped me realize my other negative coping mechanisms like binge watching things. Like, that's pretty normal too in our society, but like
I was thinking while you said that I think binge watching is an American fucking epidemic. Like I read a statistic the other day that said Americans on average watch 28 hours of TV a week. And I'm just like, what? Like I know there's a lot of good shows on, don't get me wrong, but 4 hours a day is insane.
Right.
Insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people don't talk about that as an avoidance behavior. Like, listen, I have my shows, right? Love the Bold Type, The Witcher. If y'all haven't seen The Witcher, watch it. But 4 hours a day is freaking ludicrous to me. Ludicrous.
I've definitely watched way more than that. in a day.
Like, sure, like you have one day, like probably once a month, I have a day where like my ass does not get off the couch. Like I am watching 6 or 7 hours of TV and I need that veg state to be good. But like, if that's what you're doing every day, like, surprise, folks, you have shit that you're avoiding. You need to deal with it.
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
Yeah. So you have come out of that in your perfect segue. Like, how do you take care of your mental health now? Because it has to be a consistent practice. So like, what do you do consistently, or what, once in a while, whatever, that like helps you?
Well, and this is like, duh, no brainer. Like, people
It's not a no brainer. People have to be taught.
I know, but people know it. It's a common thing, but it's
Yes.
like easier said than done type thing.
If it was a knowledge gap, therapists and coaches would not exist.
Right.
So pretend it's not a no-brainer. What do you do?
So I did a lot of like self-exploration, and one of the biggest things I do that helps me so much in my mental health is exercise. I realize how huge it is, and like, it's not a cookie that like is not a cookie cutter thing. Like, for me, I cannot go to the gym by myself. Like, it ain't gonna happen ever. Like, it does not work for me.
That's
And so you have to figure out what works for you.
Yeah.
So
I'm actually like a solo gym person. I'm like, put my headphones in, put on my workout playlist, and I'm just like, grind. But like, if people talk to me, I turn into like a hissing cat. I'm like, I just want to work out. So like, you're a group person?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I need group classes. I need group fitness. I need somebody who is going to like push me to, that I need that external accountability. And I need that external accountability in most of the things in my life, like all the time. So I love it because I love that collaborate. I feel energized by other people.
Yeah. Okay.
All the things. So,
and that takes you a little while to work out, because if you thought there was only one way that you had to do it by yourself, you're supposed to like that, blah, 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 you'd be freaking miserable and you probably wouldn't do it.
Yep. Nope.
So you exercise. What else do you do?
I realized that I love, like, I do go exploring a lot. So anytime I can like go out into the city or, into the beach, like whenever I was living in Philly, I used to go explore the city a lot. And literally one of my favorite things was like exiting the subway, listening to my headphones, and just like being amongst the big buildings. And I was like, like, it just brought so much happiness to my soul.
Dude, that's such a vibe.
Soul here is like going to the beach, of course, and like watching the sunset. And like sometimes I'm like, no, I gotta go watch the sunset. Bye. like I just gotta go.
So that's actually a thing. So I read a book by a guy named Wallace J. Nichols, who I will, side note, like link in the like podcast and video notes, whatever. It's called Blue Mind. And so his book is all about the effects of the ocean, more the ocean specifically, but water in general, on psychology. And it was like, I will be leading ocean retreats once coronavirus is freaking over. Side note, if you're listening to this in like 2030, it's 2020. COVID-19 is a thing. It's fucking up everyone's life. It's annoying. So it exists, whatever time period people are listening to this or watching it. So ocean retreats, and I'm just like, I'm doing this. So though that has such a biological impact on our nervous system and on our cells and on our life. So hell yes that you do that. And two, there's a thing called sun gazing. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
So when you wake up, hopefully everyone wakes up, like wake up tomorrow. When you wake up, your cortisol spikes to get you like ready for the day. So cortisol is a stress hormone, but it also kind of amps up your energy. So when you turn your eyes to the sun in sunrise and sunset, you start aligning your hormone production with your circadian rhythm, which affects your entire body. So it's a thing called sun gazing, where you look at the sunrise or you look at the sunset and literally get like the sun in your eyeballs. Now, obviously, don't do this at like noon. You're gonna go blind. For
Or
everyone
an
listening,
eclipse.
do not do it during an eclipse. Do not do it during full sunlight. But in the morning is actually when your melatonin, which is the sleep hormone, starts producing, and it knows to start producing because your eyes are being hit by direct sunlight. So sun gazing, you're doing it naturally without knowing that it's a thing, and it regulates your hormones.
That's so cool.
Which is wild. So you're just like, this feels good. I'm supposed to do it. And so I'm doing it, which is a really big testament to like how deep your body knowledge runs. Like your body knows what it needs to do, which is why you feel good going to the ocean or watching the sunset or being outside. They've done really cool studies where they like blindfold people and have them touch objects. So like plastic or glass or metal, and they measure their like brain activity, brain response, their brain activity. And then they have them touch like wood or dirt or clay or leaves. And the stress response when you're touching man-made things is activated. But the like regulation response when you're touching natural elements is activated. So like you actually literally have a stress response when you're surrounded by man-made things, which is insane. Which is why it feels good to be outside. So you're just like doing these things, not knowing why, but it's like it has a huge basis in biology.
Yeah, that's so fascinating.
So keep doing it. You're killing. So what are you doing now? When we were talking last, time doesn't exist to me, so maybe last week, you were talking about working with like a domestic violence shelter and like the initiatives that you want to do once you're out of school. So please tell us about that because they are dope.
Yeah. So currently I'm back in Tampa, not in Philly. And I'm getting involved again with some community partners around Tampa Bay. Just getting my foot in the door. So right now I'm with Hear Our Voices, and so they are an organization dedicated to uplifting and empowering youth to use their voices around like, I love working with youth. That's my favorite.
Yeah. They're a whole mood by themselves. I'm just like, yes.
Yeah, and like they're so misunderstood, so not heard all the time. Like I always feel like adults forget that they were once teenagers too. Like that crap was hard. Like why like instead of judging them, like listening to them, like all they want to do is be heard and understood because they feel so misunderstood all the time. Anyway, love kids.
Yes.
But so working with them, and I connected the Spring of Tampa Bay, which is a domestic violence agency here, with them, and we're going to be doing like a couple of like workshop. It's not a workshop, but like discussions. And so I interned with the Spring. They're a dope organization because they're the largest in Tampa Bay. They have like the Hotline, the shelter, things like that. They have like thrift stores, which is super cool because I mean, I've only been in Philly and Tampa, but like Philly didn't have anything like that so like that was really cool.
So if someone is listening in the Tampa area, which if you're my friend, you better be, like, what are the thrift stores called? How do they support these organizations?
Yeah, there's like the Boutique, which is in South Tampa, and on like, I want to say Himes and Henderson.
Boutique.
Yes, that one's called like the Spring Boutique.
Okay.
And then the other one is connected to the Spring, and that's closer to downtown, and that's connected to like their warehouse and like offices. And so you can literally like look up the Spring and you'll find it.
So these two organizations, they have websites, I assume?
Yes.
So we can we'll link the website. So if people want to donate.
Yes. And right now you can donate on Fridays, I think between 3 and 5. They've just limited their like donation times because of COVID.
Oh, I mean like money donations through the internet.
Okay, that too.
Is like that's yeah. So I want to link the website so if people want to make a donation to the organization through like I don't know what they use, PayPal, whatever. They can do that. So like we'll do that after. Like give me all that information. We'll link it for them.
Perfect. That sounds great. But yes, with the stores, you're literally when you buy there, you're basically donating to the organization to like provide for these survivors.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
So what do you do with them? It sounds like you're doing community initiatives.
Yeah, so we're just right now kind of setting up talks with youth around LGBTQ topics and healthy relationships. So that's going to be our next like thing in September. That's just my little side projects. I'm not even, that's just like me volunteering my time there. But currently I am also doing qualitative research on intimate partner violence on Penn's campus. Well, not specifically on that, but the services for survivors and students. So how can we improve those? And then one of my biggest ideas, and I think you wanted me to get to, was
please, yes,
my dream of hopefully starting a nonprofit where I'd be helping survivors of domestic violence or intimate partner violence become economically empowered, because that is something that like it's only been researched in the last like 5-ish years. Like research has popped off on that like that is something that we should be focusing on. Like
just like
talk about economic abuse. Like
water is wet, people.
Yeah.
What, like it's like when people do studies and they're like animals have emotions, and it's like no shit, homie. Like, why do people stay in abusive relationships? Very often because they're financially, they have to.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. They have no choice. If they have kids with this person and they're the main breadwinner, what are they going to do? If they're isolated from their family, isolated from their friends, have nowhere to go, things like this. So, and not to mention, so kind of like no work history,
right.
Or like if they do, it's unstable because of their situation, because a lot of the times like a abusive partner might like call and like ask that person while they're at work, and then their employer will fire them because it's unsafe for everyone. And it's like, no, bro, it's not unsafe for everyone. It's unsafe for this person. And so basically my whole idea is dating. So there's already organizations that kind of do that for formerly incarcerated individuals, where they hire them and give them, and it's typically in a restaurant. And I love restaurants. I love food. Oh, that's another thing that I do for self-care is I cook a lot. I love cooking. But so kind of incorporating like that aspect with all of, my education is like really cool. Would be really cool. So hiring these people, whether it's like they're doing front of house work, back of house work, like what are they doing? Like, can I get them like those skills? And then like how, and then like also doing a lot of like financial and economic empowerment in the shelters and things like that. So really connecting all of it, providing them daycare. So like another thing super huge, like I would want to like have the restaurant, but then like, can I also have a spot in the back where there's people that are helping taking care of all of the kids? So how can I accomplish that? Because that is
very holistic.
Such a huge barrier for people is childcare.
Right.
And finding free, affordable childcare, so it can actually work. So
I have people here who pay over $1,000 a month for childcare. Yes. And I would rather rip my head off. Like,
I know.
I understand why people don't work. Pivots for business. So I love that you're taking such a holistic view. So what can people do to help? And we're nearing like the end now. So like what can people do to get involved if people are interested in community engagement, or they're interested in helping survivors of domestic violence or intimate partner violence, or they're just like, oh shit, maybe they're talking to me, like I don't feel safe in my relationship. Like that's kind of three different questions, but like go in whatever order you want. What can people do? So maybe we'll start with like, if people think maybe they're in an unsafe situation, relationship, what can they do? And then how can people get involved if this is something they want to support?
Yeah, so definitely if they're in an unhealthy relationship. So there's definitely a spectrum of what is a healthy, unhealthy, and then like abusive. So there's kind of like this spectrum of that. Because a lot of the times people are in unhealthy relationships, but it's not necessarily abusive.
Right.
But it still will take a toll on you emotionally. So definitely becoming educated, if you're listening, like searching those types of things clearly in a like, as safely as possible.
Put your search engine on incognito mode for anyone listening. Also, DuckDuckGo is a search engine that does not track your searches. So just for anyone listening, DuckDuckGo, or you can do incognito mode, which means none of those things will save.
Yes. And we can also link the domestic violence hotline to this as well. So as well as the spring information. There's a national hotline for DV as well. Yeah. But you can always call, like, because sometimes it's really hard to talk to your friends, and that's the biggest thing that I talk to with youth is like, so many times people are like, oh, you're in an unhealthy relationship or abusive relationship, like, why don't you just leave? Why don't you just leave? And then that's not helpful. Instead of, I always love like trying to talk to youth or anybody, adults too, like, if you are dealing with, if you're seeing it happen, like, you can never control another human being in their life. So how can you be open and saying, like, I'm here, what I'm seeing is concerning, right? Yep. What I'm seeing is concerning, and I am concerned for your safety, your health, your well-being, your emotional health, your spiritual health, all of the things. But I see you're not ready. I'm here for you whenever you're ready and you need help.
How can you be a safe person for them to come to when they are ready?
Right.
And the best ways to not be a safe person is to say, well, why don't you just leave? So for anyone listening, never, just never say that to your friend. A different question would be, how can I help you? Mm-hmm. What do you need right now? Well, I just need someone to vent to. You got it, bud. Like, be a safe person when they're ready, but you can't force it. So solid advice, like, just be a safe person for them to come to, and recognize that you can't step in. Sometimes people want to step in, and it really puts the person who's being abused in danger. Mm-hmm. Like, so definitely even more. Don't confront the abuser. Don't step in. Just be a safe person when they are ready. So they can Google the spring. We'll definitely link that. The domestic violence hotline will link. What about in their communities? If they're like, hey, this, by the way, it's definitely happening in your community, wherever you're listening.
All around the world. It's a global issue.
Google to get involved.
So if you're in schools, depending on like your age and things like that. But I mean, I remember when I was at USF, so I know that schools, and if it's not at your school, if you're like in high school or whatever, probably everyone here is an adult, but like high schools can always contact like their local domestic violence agency, and there's always youth programs happening within that. So how can you get involved? You can always contact those types of groups. Maybe there's one already in school. Like sometimes there are youth action committees in schools. Going towards like college, I remember I got involved with NIGHT. So it was like a safety organization. So like how can we keep our campus safe, basically. And so that was something that I got involved with. And they do things like take back the night, walk in her shoes, like all these like different kind of like
Events.
kind of like a protest, but like
events.
Yeah, events.
So they can Google like domestic violence shelter. I know ours in town is called the Family Crisis Center, and you can go volunteer with them. So they, even if you don't want to be working directly with survivors, they always need admin work, right? They're most likely nonprofits, so they need admin work. They need people to call. If there's a thrift store, you could probably work there.
Sort. So I used to like sort if anybody wants to ever volunteer. Like I used to sort all of the items at the spring. So in their warehouse, you like sort through them and do that. And that was something that I did a lot whenever I was growing. So I've always kind of been connected to the spring in a lot of ways. Yeah.
I have a woman here that does grocery runs for our local domestic violence shelter. She they give her a list. She goes to the grocery store, she picks up the donated food, and she brings it back. So there's a ton of ways for people to get involved. Probably more than people think. Like it doesn't have to be directly with survivors. There are those things too. Like we have like rape advocates who will go to the hospital if someone has been sexually assaulted, or they'll go to the court case with them. Right. But you don't have to do that, which thank you for sharing.
I know we're like last minute of the time, but I just want to highlight how, so I used to be a domestic violence counselor, and so I worked with survivors directly, but one of the greatest things I found, and it was like, as hard as that work was and how like heart-wrenching it was to like hear their stories, it was also super empowering, and I was so in awe of how these women, self-identifying women, I didn't ever have male clients, but we had male clients, all of the creative and inventive ways things that they did to keep themselves safe. Mm-hmm. Like I was always like shocked in such it was amazement, not shocked, but I was amazed,
like blown away.
And it brought me to tears so many times because I was like, yo, you're amazing. Like, and you want them to see it too. Because so many times survivors and victims of these abusive situations, they don't have the self-esteem there. Like their self-esteem is low because this person has chipped away at it.
Right.
So like, I don't know. They were always so amazing and so beautiful, and I always miss my clients. Aww. But
something I do notice with trauma work is like people are extremely inventive when their survival's on the line, whether it makes sense down the road or not. Like in the moment, if it kept you alive, it was the best decision you could have made, regardless of if it long-term makes a lot of sense. If it keeps you alive in the moment, it's a good thing. So whatever people had to do, this is something I want to leave with, like whatever people have to do to survive is a good choice, even if it doesn't make sense to anyone else, because you do what you have to do. And not all of those things are helpful long-term, but if they keep you alive in the moment, it's a good decision, like hands down. Definitely. So what is something that you want to leave our listeners or like viewers with?
Ooh, just based on
anything.
Ooh. Let's see. Things are tough sometimes, but just always remembering that you're not alone, and it's really important to ask for help when you need it, whether it is help with a paper, whether it's help with your emotional like struggles, anything. Like I wouldn't be where I am if I wasn't honest with myself and I wasn't honest with people. And sometimes not everyone has those people or feel like they don't, but there are people out there that can help. That's why there are, hotline numbers, and it feels weird and it might feel icky to like talk to a complete stranger about it, but there are people out there that care, and your safety and your happiness is important.
Yep.
And it may feel really hard right now, but people are out there that can help you gain skills like Amanda, like myself, to get you to a place where you're healthy and happy and working towards that. Because you're not always healthy and you're not always happy, but it's always a work in progress.
And I want to just add too that it's okay to ask for help multiple times.
Yes.
Like it's okay to make steps out and then go back, and to make steps out and go back. Like healing doesn't happen in a linear fashion. It's always expand and contract. So yeah, if you're asking for help now and you don't take all the steps, like who gives a shit? You still ask for help and it's still good. So yeah, 100%. 100%. I love it. So you are so dope. I'm gonna like stop the recording and then we can talk. So thank you so much. Like we will link everything that we talked about. I like made a note of it to do. Thank you. That was beautiful.
Thank you.